What's up, fellas? Today I wanted to make a video going over my favorite bodybuilding exercise for each major muscle group. Um, Emphasis on bodybuilding, these are hypertrophy specific, and some of my exercise selection might be a little bit more like isolation, kind of fluffy training than what you might expect, and that's because within the scope of my training, once I finish my primarily strength-focused work, there's a certain amount of central nervous system fatigue, there's a certain amount of soft tissue fatigue that I've accumulated from those main heavy compound motions. When I get into the purely hypertrophy focused stuff, because some training is going to be both strength and hypertrophy focused, when I get into the true hypertrophy focused only, the true bodybuilding stuff to end the workout, I'm usually picking less invasive motions, doing a little bit more some volume rather than the kind of heavy blood and guts Dorian Yates style one top set, beat the books at whatever costs work for my bodybuilding, because I've already gotten that very intense stimulus from the heavy compound loading in my strength training. So when I do the bodybuilding stuff, I often will choose a little bit lower scale motions that are going to allow me to localize the fatigue a little bit more. We're going to get to that pretty quickly in my list. So getting into it, I'm going to start with calves. If I were to pick one exercise as far as building big calves, it would be without a doubt just a standing calf raise. When you're looking at, you have your gastroc and your soleus. When your knee is relatively straight, you're going to train the gastroc a little bit more, quite a bit more emphasis on it. And if your knee is bent, we're going to train the soleus quite a bit more. So if we were doing calf raises with the intention of improving our ankle health or our ankle mobility before squatting or after squatting, I would recommend the seated. But if the goal is purely mass, we're going to be doing standing calf raises, just because the gastroc is a much bigger muscle, and that's what you're looking to build predominantly if you want visually large calves. Standing calf raise machine is ideal. It just doesn't take any time to set up. We can train it 2 to 3 times a week, trying to beat the books anywhere from 8 reps up to 30 reps, tracking these rep PRs at different weights and just hammering away 2 or 3 times a week and aggressively beating the books. Your calves will grow. If they're a genetic weak suit, then it might take a while, but they will grow. And if you don't have a standing calf raise machine, you could build yourself a little calf raise block pretty easily. Just 2 2x4s like this, one across the top, drill it in, put some gripping across the top, like skateboard truck type thing, or top of the skateboard. Yeah, you can make that, do it in the Smith machine, do it with an SSB. You can do single leg standing ones with a dumbbell if you don't have any of these things, but that would be my pick for the calves. Next, for hamstrings, from a purely size perspective, and this ties into what I said earlier, which is when I'm doing my bodybuilding work, you have to realize that when I'm talking about it, it's always following strength work, and I'm trying to localize the fatigue. I would without a doubt pick a seated hamstring curl. A, it's going to localize the fatigue. B, it's going to lend itself to greater amounts of working volume than something like a RDL, where the limiting factor is likely to be how much your lower back can handle. We're more likely to reach what the upper limits of what our hamstrings can handle are. There's some evidence to suggest that training a muscle at a greater average length yields a little bit more hypertrophy. So on paper, a seated hamstring curl is probably a little bit better than a lying hamstring curl, although in a perfect world we do both. And the other thing that I like quite a bit about the seated hamstring curl that I don't like as much about the lying hamstring curl is the way you're oriented. You're pretty much forced to move the weight with your hamstrings. There are no other options, whereas you can contribute to a lying hamstring curl pretty significantly with your lower back, if that's not something you're aware of, and it can kind of jack you up a little bit, to be honest. But yeah, that would be my pick for hamstrings, is a seated hamstring curl. My pick for quads would be a ass-to-grass hack squat or ass-to-grass belt squat. I mean, it depends on what you have, but if we're picking my ideal scenario, if you've got a good hack squat that doesn't torch your knees, I would pick a hack squat 10 times out of 10. You always have the option, if you have a bad hack squat that kind of bangs up your knees, you can wear your knee sleeves. You can reverse band the machine to kind of fiddle with that resistance curve to be a little bit more joint friendly. Both of those things are options before we give up on the hack squat, but you can also do, any myriad of other ass to grass exercises where we're not going to be limited by our lower back. And if we're doing an ass to grass squatting type motion, I think largely adductor and glute development are going to take care of themselves. But if I were to pick one adductor exercise, it would just be going pretty heavy for volume on the adductor machine. Pretty simple one. For glutes, I would have to pick walking lunges. I think a lot of people would pick something that's training the glute in more of a shortened position, such as a hip thrust or a weighted back extension. And while those are phenomenal exercises, nothing has made me see as much appreciable glute hypertrophy as doing walking lunges with longer strides and a forward lean to the torso. So taking dumbbells as you stride, holding those dumbbells over that lead leg, made me see much more significant glute gains than anything else I've ever done. I've tried a lot of different things because at various points in my lifting career, glutes have been kind of a weakness for me. Then for abs, hanging leg raises, maybe ab wheels would be my two picks. Maybe cable crunches. Kind of all those are interchangeable to me. But from purely hypertrophy, I guess I would have to pick hanging leg raises. For the obliques, honestly, I'd probably just say like a suitcase carry, so one-sided farmer's carry. Not many people need to do that much work to hypertrophy their obliques. It'll just kind of happen from heavy axial loading a lot of the time. But if we were to want to, I'd probably just do suitcase carries. For the lower back, again, following the idea that this is following my heavy compound strength lifting, I would say that if you want really well-developed spinal erectors, deadlifts will get you them. Heavy hinges, right? Be it from the floor or RDLs, you're going to get very well-developed spinal erectors, so that's the real answer. But in this, where I'm probably saying that I'm already doing those as my strength work, I would just say weighted back extensions would be my lower back exercise. Working our way on up. For the pecs, I would have to say either a full ROM dumbbell bench press where you get into an arch, you get your back tight, and instead of going like this, you rotate your hands to allow you to bring the dumbbells, or if we had a bar going across our hands, it would actually be coming slightly below how low we're able to take a regular bar bench press with our normal amount of arch, get a full stretch out of the pecs, a quick pause at the bottom, power out. I would say that would be my number one, with number two, maybe if you don't have access, being chest focused dips. So kind of looking down at the floor, pitching your weight, kind of kicking your legs back behind you, pitching your weight forward, and kind of really getting a full stretch as long as our shoulders allow for it. Those would be kind of interchangeable for my favorite pec exercises. Continuing to move along, front delts, probably behind the neck Smith press would be my go-to if you're able to. If that bugs your shoulders, it could be that you just haven't really developed that much strength and stability around the shoulder joint. So don't tell yourself that you're not able to do it for life. It might be worthwhile saying, hey, I can't do these yet, and that's okay, I can work into them. But if you can't work into them, doing some kind of Smith press outside behind the neck, so like a high incline or a regular seated overhead press in the Smith machine, just not having to worry about stabilizing the bar and being able to take the front delts to mechanical failure is very valuable from a hypertrophy perspective. For lateral delts, I would have to say either a lateral raise machine if you have one, especially like one of those Arsenal ones where you grab it rather than going from the elbow. But if you don't have that, a cable side lateral raise, just because when you look at a dumbbell, we know a lot of value in loading a muscle can come from loading the stretched position. And if we look at the direction of gravity, we are barely loading the most stretched position for our lateral delt and a side raise. Not to say that there's anything wrong with them. They're a great exercise if you like them, do them. But on paper, potentially a cable crossbody lateral might be a little bit better, where we can load the full range of motion with a relatively even resistance curve rather than only challenging the delt in that upper quarter. So I'd pick a cable lateral raise for the lateral delt. For the rear delt, kind of the same idea. We want to have a good resistance curve ideally. So either reverse pec flies on the pec deck, single arm crossbody cable rear delt flies, or bilateral if you have an empty gym where you don't feel like a douchebag for using two cables at once, right? So 2 arms at once, cables, that's probably my favorite, but most people don't have the access to taking 2 cables at once, so single arm crossbody or using the reverse pec deck. For the rear delts would be my favorite one. Really, really pushing a shit ton of volume, using some intensifiers like drop sets, and I love partials on rear delts. I think they're very effective. That would be my next one. Triceps, I'm gonna be honest, just mastering tricep press downs on a straight bar or a V bar, or any kind of tricep press down where you're not gonna take over using your chest and your front delts. You're keeping it strict, pushing lots of volume on those has always been my go-to for triceps. And if you're not particularly strong, I will definitely recommend a dumbbell French press, where you take a dumbbell, grab the handle between your hands like this, take it behind the head like this. Great exercise. Those were a staple early in my training career. If you're a stronger guy, you're going to run into logistical issues of not having heavy enough dumbbells realistically. And if you do have heavy enough dumbbells, getting them up into place is a little bit dicey, maybe a little bit dangerous going as heavy as you need to if you're a stronger guy. But if you're a beginner, you're an intermediate, wonderful exercise, staple of my early training career, helped me grow my triceps quite a bit. For biceps, I would say I do really like those incline curls because we can train the bicep at a greater average length, which we've talked about. But I'd say, kind of idiot-proofing it, anything where you're fixing your elbow position. So a preacher curl, anything where you fix your elbow, a concentration curl, so we can take the motion really objectively to mechanical failure. You're not like, oh, did I cheat that rep? Did I do a cheat rep? Did I swing it? Well, you can't if your elbow is fixed. So either did the dumbbell come up or did it not come all the way up? And that's how you know when you reached mechanical failure. So I'd say that's a really simple one. Anything where your elbow is fixed kind of does the same thing. You can mess around with what you're doing with your forearm, potentially target different parts of your forearm by doing like a reverse grip, a hammer curl, stuff like that. And you can also play around with where you're putting your elbow relative to your sternum. Then we have the back. These are the ones I've been debating, right? Easy one, you guys have heard me talk about it from a hypertrophy perspective. For traps, that would be probably either snatch grip shrugs or behind the back shrugs if you don't have short arms and a large ass like I do, then it's not really possible. Either or, dumbbell shrugs, but snatch grips tend to be my pick. For general upper back development, either a chest supported T-bar row or chest supported dumbbell rows at 45 degrees, so not a seal row where we're parallel to the floor, because I'd say that's a bit of a combo of upper back and lats, but more of that upright 45-degree angle, really going to develop the rear traps, the rhomboids, as well as the lats, of course. But I would say that would be my number one pick, is either that chest-supported T-bar or those dumbbell rows. Great exercises, a little bit fluffy, right? But again, we're assuming maybe before this we had done some deadlifts from the floor. We don't want to load our lower back a ton more, so doing something with a chest support makes a tremendous amount of sense. And then that leaves me with lats, and this is the one that I've been having a hard time deciding. In my experience, if you can execute them really well and you're not just doing shit reps, where you're really rowing towards the back hip, a dumbbell row, kneeling on a bench where you're kind of more your torso is more parallel with the floor, is a phenomenal lat exercise. But there's definitely a bit of a learning curve to really getting those to be in the lats, not just a bicep and trap and lat yank motion. So those are a good one. Neutral grip pull-ups are a very good one for me, and neutral grip pull downs, I guess, would probably be my picks. But yeah, I think that's all of the major muscle groups in case I've missed any. We could say that wrist extensors, top of the forearm, just doing your curls with a suicide grip, palms down. I don't really train my wrist flexors at all. They just grow from getting stronger at a variety of exercises, stones, sandbags, grip on the deadlift, they just grow. I think that if you're doing robust strength training, you don't really have to worry about the wrist flexors, but I guess wrist curls if I had to pick something. And I think that's everything. If you're really trying to maximize your calf development, I might superset your calf work with tib and raises. I find that doing a little bit of antagonistic muscle training, whatever reason, lets you grow a little bit more. Who the hell knows why? But if you're trying to grow your triceps as big as possible, doing a little bit of bicep work tends to help. Maybe it's just keeping your elbows healthy. Who the hell knows? But I find the same thing applies to calves. If we're doing a bunch of calf raises and we're really trying to maximize that development of the calf, doing a little bit of the opposite, right? So we've got dorsiflexion and we also have plantar flexion, right? It's the opposite, right? Toes up, toes down, making sure we kind of superset those antagonistic motions can be helpful. But that would be my picks. Thank you guys for watching my video. Appreciate you guys as always. And if you found the video helpful, don't forget to like it.